Hello and welcome to After Scientology, Straight Up and Vertical, the weekly show where Tony Ortega and I get together and we talk about the week's events in the world of Scientology as reported on Tony's Substack. Hey, Tony, welcome back to the show.
Let's do it, Chris. Let's get to it.
Let's do it. And boy, this week, some real legal shenanigans going on, and frustratingly so. We had basically bouncing judges this week. What was the kind of lead off with Miscavige making a sudden appearance and bouncing the judge? What the hell happened here?
Yeah, it's just a shame that these courts are rewarding Scientology leader David Miscavige for sandbagging them for his bad behavior. It's incredible. Essentially, what's going on is there are two new lawsuits against the Church of Scientology in LA Superior Court. Uh, Jane Doe 1 filed her lawsuit in December 2022, although we didn't hear about it until June 2023 when it was unsealed. And then Leah Remini filed her lawsuit against Scientology in August 2023. Now, in general, there is a short period when the lawsuit begins when either side, if they don't like who the judge is that's been assigned, can file what's called a peremptory challenge and get rid of that judge with no questions asked. You don't have to have a reason. And of course, it should only be in the first couple of weeks of the lawsuit, because what judge is going to want to get really involved in a case and read all the documents and research the case law only to get bounced later? So that's why they want it to be just very early. So Leah did that. When Leah filed her lawsuit in August, she didn't like the judge they got for whatever reason. This Judge Fahey, I think his name was. I don't know why. Something about something her attorneys didn't like this guy. So she filed a peremptory challenge. She can do that. He's got to go. That, the new judge in her case was then this woman, Barbara Shepard. She recused herself then because her husband had worked for Scientology at some point as an attorney. So that's how we got Judge Randy Hammock. And, I talked to you about this. We liked this guy. I was actually in the court in LA and saw him in action. He put the work in. He did some things that Leah didn't like, obviously. He dismissed a lot of her defamation claims. But what mattered was how much he cared about it. When he put together this tentative ruling, he said in court, and I was there, he had never worked harder on a motion in his entire career as a judge. That's how seriously he had taken this.
Yeah.
Well, Scientology didn't like that ruling. Even though it dismissed quite a few of Leah's claims, it kept eight of her nine causes of action. And, it was still very good for Leah, and Scientology hated it. So remember, though, what did David Miscavige do when this lawsuit was filed? He did what he always did. He went on the run, right? He evaded the process servers. He's got this whole army that keeps him away from process servers because he's got money. This is about privilege, right? This wealthy guy that's got layers of security guards to make sure nobody can serve him a lawsuit. So for months this goes on. Finally, Judge Hammock had enough of it. And he started talking about how this is getting kind of ludicrous. He said that when I was in court. And so it became obvious to everybody that Judge Hammock was going to rule that Leah had done enough to declare him service by substitute service.
Yep.
At the last second, Scientology came in and said, "Okay, we'll accept service." Dave's attorney said, "We'll accept service." But Judge Hammock was still so kind of pissed off about the whole thing. He went ahead and filed his ruling in that, even though it was moot by that point, just to blow off steam about how Miscavige was wasting everybody's time.
Exactly.
Now, even though they had accepted service, it turns out that he still held back his initial appearance in the lawsuit. Once Judge Hammock did make this ruling that, like I said, got rid of some of Leah's claims, but in general was good for her, then Miscavige came down to court, said, "Okay, I'm in the lawsuit now. Oh, it's the first 2 weeks of the lawsuit for me. I get to make a peremptory challenge. Judge, you're out of here." They see how cynical that is. That's not the way the law was designed.
Right.
They're taking they're taking advantage of the fact that he got away with evading all this time. It's so unfair to Leah Remini.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Also, in Jane Doe's case, it's even worse in Jane Doe's case because she's facing this really difficult situation that's happened to so many people that have sued Scientology. Scientology goes and digs up a contract that they've signed and said, look, it's got an arbitration clause. You're not supposed to be suing us. You've got to come to our internal arbitration instead. That showdown was scheduled for April 16th. And, you and I talked about this, Chris. We were dreading it because, there was a contract, and thus these judges are like, a contract's a contract. But what shocked us was that the night before, on Monday the 15th, Judge Robert Broadbelt posted a tentative ruling. Now, I've seen some people ask me, why do they do that? Judges post a tentative ruling the night before so that the attorneys will then focus their arguments on what's in that ruling and not waste a lot of time.
right.
So he posted the tentative ruling the night before. It was beautiful. He said, yes, there's a contract. It looks valid. It looks like the signature is fine. But he then said, but let's look at the agreement that requires Jane Doe not to sue. It doesn't require Scientology not to sue. Scientology could still sue her if they wanted. He said, that's not mutual. That's unfair. It is so unfair, it shocks the conscience and therefore is unconscionable. That was the ruling he was going to make in court Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. Los Angeles time. So what did Dave do at 9 a.m.? He sends his personal attorney, Jeffrey Riffer, down there to say, hey, Dave's making his initial appearance. He's in the lawsuit now. It's the first 2 weeks for him. Guess what? You're gone, Judge. And this stunned when that was like an hour before the hearing. So that when the hearing, the judge comes in and says, well, I've been removed. Jane Doe's attorneys were shocked. They were like, this looks suspicious. This looks so. It was, David Miscavige taking advantage of the sandbagging he had done, of keeping himself out of the lawsuit. It's so unfair. It's such a, again, I'll say it again. U.S. courts are literally not set up to deal with a entity that deals in nothing but bad faith, like the Church of Scientology.
That's right.
So
that's
now,
exactly right.
Both of those cases lost their judges. Leah's lost Judge Randy Hammock. Jane Doe's lost Judge Robert Broadbelt, who had both made favorable decisions. They've both been assigned randomly new judges. But both Leah and Jane Doe have filed, and that was the new news this week. They have both filed what they call a notice of related cases. And they're both pointing out, there's a third lawsuit against Scientology at LA Superior Court right now. That's the Bixler lawsuit that was filed by Danny Masterson's victims back in 2019.
Yep.
That lawsuit was on hold for quite a while as Danny was going through his criminal trials, but now that case is going again. And its judge is Judge Upinder Kalra. He's also a new judge. He wasn't the original judge. And he had a really great ruling, just knocking down an attempt by Scientology to gut that lawsuit. So both Leah and Jane Doe's legal teams, which are basically the same anyway, are both saying, look, they're very similar cases. They're handling the same concepts about Scientology harassment. Judge Upinder Kalra should be handling them all. Because if you have new judges come in, they're going to have to do all this duplication of resources, but also they may have conflicting rulings on the same issues that'll then have to go to appeals courts and all this. So, Dave got to get rid of those two judges for completely cynical reasons that are completely unfair. Yeah. Now, Leah and Jane Doe want the judge to be changed again for very sound and reasonable reasons. And so that's why I assume the court won't go along with it.
And I have to cynically agree with you at this point. It's hard to keep upbeat and optimistic in the face of procedural problems like this. And I say procedural because the judges are not doing this out of malice or ignorance or because they want to. They're doing this because procedurally they have to. And or at least they feel they have to. I don't know. I'm no legal eagle. I don't know if they have to, but that's how I see it. And it is, as you said, it is privilege at the nth degree. It is what Scientology's money actually pays for,
Yeah,
is the legal advice and attorneys to do this kind of bullshit.
that's right.
Your dime a dozen lawyers don't pull this crap. They don't have the time. They don't have the experience. It's the legal eagles that the church gets to afford with their tax deductible dollars that affords them this kind of protection. And let's be clear that that's exactly what this is. It's protection for the church so it can continue its duplicitous bullshit and con people and take their money.
Yeah.
And it's a really vicious cycle. And unfortunately, our systems are not set up for these kind of outliers, these cults, these groups that don't believe in societal norms and in fact think that's a joke. And so they don't have any problem at all violating every rule and standard because they just don't, they're on their own thing. They're on Xenu track. They're not here. And that's the sort of bubble world crap that these guys justify and get away with. It's incredibly frustrating to watch normal, regular people who don't have really much of a clue about this stuff. And I don't have any reason to believe that any of these judges really understand what a cult is. But to watch them just get walked all over like this is what these people, cult leaders, do. They take advantage of every single norm.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's been very, very difficult to watch them take advantage of our system this way. And that's what's been going on. So I think you're absolutely right that getting us all under one house, under one judge, he can see the whole picture and it will give him a broader scope for each one of the cases because he'll be able to see this and this and this, Anyway, I hope they get it. I hope they get that. Okay. Enough of my weekly angst. Rebecca Minkoff. Now, this is a famous Scientologist, Scientology family, and now she's a celebrity. And what's going on with this now?
Well, we've been writing about her for a long time.
Yeah.
Many years. She's an interesting figure. She's famous for being a handbag designer. She's a figure in the world of fashion. But she's also a longtime Scientologist, grew up in it. And Deadline first reported that the newest season of Real Housewives of New York is filming has been including her. Now, apparently, the way Real Housewives works is you have a particular cast of women that are the housewives, but then as they're filming, they bring in various other people to see how they interact because a show like that it's all about who creates drama, who makes things interesting. And so they'll bring in quite a few people and then some of them will become what's called friends of the show. And so the way that they're reporting it is they're saying we don't know, People magazine followed like 2 hours later saying we've confirmed it. What People in Deadline and some of these other outlets are saying is we don't know what her role is going to be on the show, but we've confirmed that she's been filming, some stuff.
Okay.
Well, then later that evening, Page Six at New York Post was the first to also point out, oh, by the way, she's also a lifelong Scientologist, and check out this photo. And it was a photo of Rebecca Minkoff and Danny Masterson.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, they were tight. They were tight. And so I went ahead the next day and brought up all the stuff that we've paid attention to her because, first of all, she and her brother Uri are the children of David Minkoff, the just infamous quack Scientology physician those are two words that should never go together. Scientology, physician, right?
Yeah.
There's like two or three in the world, as far as I know.
Yep.
And he's famous because when Lisa McPherson was being held at the hotel, Fort Harrison Hotel, in late 1995, the caretakers were calling Minkoff and asking him about prescribing her, giving her sedatives, giving her Valium and some other stuff. And he was telling them, yeah, do this, do that, never seeing her, right?
Right.
So then, when she was clearly, after 17 days of this terrible treatment where they wouldn't talk to her, kept her in silence, and she was having this horrible mental breakdown and not eating or anything. Finally, after 17 days, when it was clear that she was dying, they bundled her into a van, and instead of driving her to the closest hospital, they drove 45 minutes to get to the hospital where Minkoff was
Right.
because they wanted the Scientology doctor to see her. And by the time they got there, she was dead. He had, he testified that as soon as he saw her, he knew she was dead.
Yep.
He lost his medical license for a year and had to pay $10,000 specifically because he had prescribed her sedatives without actually seeing her.
Yep.
But, it's just, I remember back in 2015 or 16, Rod Keller wrote a great piece for us at the Bunker where he said, he's still doing what he's always done. He's got this clinic in Clearwater, Florida, just quack therapies, and I'm learning some more that I'm hoping I'm going to write about later on. Just
Good.
absolute pseudoscience garbage, Chris.
Ugh.
And I remember thinking, this guy, he's just amazing. Well, 2 years later, 2017, I was kind of stunned because I saw that Rebecca Minkoff was doing some things that were fairly high profile. Now, you would think if your dad was the notorious quack involved in the death of Lisa McPherson, you might not kind of play down your whole Scientology thing, right?
Right.
No, she's giving a speech at the Drug Free World annual gala in New York City, which is a branch of Drug Free World that infiltrates New York City schools with the help of the NYPD. I've been writing about this for 12 years or something, Chris. It's outrageous. And Rebecca Minkoff's out there helping them do it. And then, like 6 months later, she opened the NASDAQ one morning with this Megan Fialkoff from the Drug Free World. So I thought that was kind of amazing that she's being pretty open about the fact that she's helping out Scientology's sneaky front groups. And then 2 years later after that, in 2019, I love these impact magazines because we get an idea of who the big donors are, and I keep track of these people that have donated $1 million, $2 million, $5 million to Scientology's slush fund, so Dave can do all this litigation. And in 2019, they had a special ceremony at Flag in Clearwater for L. Ron Hubbard's birthday. That's what it was in 2019. And so here's pictures of all these wealthy folks with their big trophies. And one of them is not just David Minkoff, but his family, including Rebecca. Rebecca Minkoff in the photo with their dad getting a trophy showing they donated $5 million. Celebrities very, very rarely take those trophies publicly.
That's right.
The only other one besides Rebecca Minkoff is Nancy Cartwright.
Mm-hmm.
And who was the Waltons woman? I always forget her name.
Oh, Judy Norton Taylor.
Judy Norton Taylor. She also has taken trophies, but very few. And so all that is background. Now she's going on Real Housewives, and the press has been like, well, she's kind of open in interviews. She'll talk about it. She talked about it to the New York Times, and it's the typical thing. It's just like, oh, there's a lot of nonsense about Scientology out there. It's helped me. I mean, there's she's not talking about any of this. Lisa McPherson, her dad, the quack, her involvement in Drug Free World, the $5 million. So it'll be really interesting to see if anything like that comes up at Real Housewives. I kind of doubt it. But it could be an interesting situation. I don't know. I don't know what she's going to allow herself to get into with that. What do you
Yeah,
think?
exactly. And that's been the thing, is that she hasn't really been publicly challenged in any significant way on any of this, and she's managed to deflect or stay away from it somehow, and continue to be open about this. But she needs to be challenged about this. Public figures, especially, have a responsibility to answer to those kinds of questions. It's not just my personal religious beliefs. You don't get to say stuff like that when you're out there going, well, there's a lot of misinformation. Oh, yeah, like what? Please tell us. Tell us all about the misinformation about Scientology. I'm all ears.
Right.
Like, let's have a conversation. They never do. Tom Cruise shuts down anything, even vaguely approximating conversations about Scientology. He refuses to go there, right? Mr. Freedom Medal of Valor winner. These guys are just a bunch of cowards, and I'll call them out on it because come on, let's talk. Anyway, yeah. And it would make, by the way, fantastic drama for the show, you know?
Yeah, but I wish they had. We'll see.
Yeah. Yeah,
Come
we'll
on.
see. I could see
Real,
reasons why legally they wouldn't want to go there,
the
but
Real Housewives are going to ask her some real questions about
yeah,
Scientology,
exactly.
or is it going to be the usual?
Exactly. Probably be more drama about her purses. You're just copying Christian Dior, or whatever. All right. Now, a couple more stories here this week. There was this email you reported on about future expansion in Scientology. What was this about?
Yeah, I had this thought when Dave was rapidly, finally opening these long delayed ideal orgs in Austin, Mexico City, Chicago, and Paris in the last few weeks.
Mm-hmm.
I remember thinking, what's on deck, Dave? I mean, as far as I can tell, the other things are all kind of stuck in fundraising phase forever.
Yep.
And there's not, that I know of, there's nothing like imminent after those four. And so I've continued to get fundraising flyers forwarded to me, but there was one from Albuquerque that was really interesting.
Mm.
Because they're trying to finish up the US. What they have left is Hawaii, Albuquerque, Battle Creek, Michigan, Long Island, Philadelphia, Boston, and New Haven. I might be missing another one, but those are the ones that they've been trying to get done to make an all ideal USA, right?
Right.
And if it followed the usual pattern, that could take 12 years, if he does like one or two a year, right? Anyway, so this new email sent out to the Albuquerque people claimed that Scientology wants all of those projects in construction by the end of the year. Not just raising money, but actually breaking ground, starting the renovations, And I think that's interesting. I don't know if Dave's going to pull that off. He makes a lot of claims that don't come true. But the question I had for you about that, Chris, is if that's the case, and if he really wants to push it and get all 7 or 8 of these projects done all at once, what's the rush?
I could only guess that maybe he's got another international program he wants to get going. And maybe this ideal org thing, which, let's face it, has been 20 years. Maybe it's time to wrap up and get on with the next phase, as he would put it, of whatever Scientology planetary clearing there is. And there are things he could push. There's plenty there. I mean, L. Ron Hubbard was prolific. So there's always stuff to reach into the archives and pull out and go, look at this new shiny thing from 1963, right? Let's talk about this now, right? So I could see it. I could see that being a reasoning for it. That's the first thing that occurs to me. The other thing, of course, that occurs to me is this is just more PR fluff, and they're just kind of trying to fan the flames and keep the fundraising alive by overpromising and under delivering, which is they've also been doing for 20 years. So, hard to say how serious he really is about stuff when even the stuff that he is deadly serious about gets delayed for years, like this executive training program.
Right.
Right? It's just, it doesn't matter what he wants. Sometimes it just doesn't happen, you know? So that's interesting. That's interesting, though, because I was thinking about Hawaii and Albuquerque, knowing everything I know about all the West US churches. And of course, it makes sense. I would have guessed Vegas would have been one of the last ones, too. They managed to pull that one off out of opportunism. They managed to get the right building at the right time. But Albuquerque has literally 3 staff. There is nothing going on in Albuquerque Scientologically. And that's really been the reason why it hasn't gone anywhere in 20 years, is because even, these are the last of the dregs, Hawaii and Albuquerque for West
And
US.
we did a story on Albuquerque, I don't know, about a year ago, and one of the things that they've done is they've changed their target. They had this kind of legendary old storefront downtown,
Mm,
and now they've selected one of these mega big buildings out on the edge of town where there's nobody walking or anything. I mean,
right.
I don't know. It's bizarre. Well, it's big, but it's in the middle of nowhere. Nobody's ever going to go there. So
Yeah, but look at all that square footage, Tony.
that's it.
It's all the square footage, see? Because that's the only statistic that really counts in Scientology anymore.
Right, right.
Yeah, no, it's for real. You wouldn't think that obvious of a thing that you could get away with something like that. And in the real world, you'd have a harder time of it. But in the bubble world, man, I'm telling you, black is white, up is down. Um, okay, now the last thing is actually something from last week, because it was totally on me. I skipped this one, but there was this very interesting story on a man named Armando Garcia and his and Kendrick Moxon and claims that were made in relation to Leah. And what is this whole story about?
Wow. I'm really glad I got a chance to talk to him because we've been
Mhm.
talking about him since December. That's when
Mhm.
it became public that Leah had submitted a page of transcript from his criminal case in her lawsuit. And the reason is Leah learned about it. I don't know how. I don't know how her attorneys found out about it. But in 2022, this guy, Armando Garcia, was leafleting various downtown LA Scientology locations. He doesn't like Scientology. And he was leafleting it. And he was on L. Ron Hubbard Way, and a security guard apparently tried to, wave him down. And Scientology's version is that this guy, Armando Garcia, tried to run over the security guard with a car. And they convinced the DA to prosecute this guy with charges of what is it? Assault with a deadly weapon, the deadly
Mm,
weapon being his car.
right.
And he had an attorney, and they eventually showed video to the judge, and the judge gave him, the least, gave him a year's probation or something. I think it was kind of an interpretation over how he stopped or not. I haven't seen the video. I don't know.
Right.
But the reason why this became an issue is that at some point in his case, his attorney, his second attorney, went to the judge and says, "Judge, we need to ask Hendrik Moxon, the attorney for the church, to sit outside because he's a potential witness." And everybody's like, "What?" Judge is like, "Why?" And then said, "Well, do you want me to tell you?" The judge said, "Please tell us in open court." So that's the key: is that the judge asked the attorney to explain, rather than going back into chambers, in open court, why Kendrick Moxon should be excluded. And her story was that at some point, Moxon came to her and said, "If you can get Armando Garcia to admit in open court or on the record that he did what he did because he was inflamed from watching Leah Remini's show, then we'll convince the DA to either knock it down to a misdemeanor or even get rid of it." And everybody knew that that's improper. The church couldn't do that. But anyway, it was essentially an attorney in a court saying to a judge that Kendrick Moxon, the attorney for Scientology, was witness tampering.
Correct. Yeah.
So Leah's team took that page of the transcript and put it in her lawsuit to say, look, Judge, Scientology will do anything to mess with her, even interfere in a criminal case.
Yep.
Moxon then immediately put a declaration into the court case saying that's not true. Her Armando Garcia's previous attorney, the first attorney on the case, had told me that the guy was hopped up on Leah's show. This didn't come out of nowhere. Everyone's lying, blah blah blah. Well, it's just really interesting moment. I finally got in touch with Armando Garcia and wanted to get his. Oh, well, then let me tell you the other thing was that the LA Times had that really good piece a couple of weeks ago by James Quealy about the DAs being threatened, being harassed, or at least one of the DAs being harassed. And one of the things he also brought up the whole Armando Garcia thing. And he had talked to that first attorney and asked him, well, Kendrick Moxon's saying on the record, in a court filing that you told him that your client was inflamed by Leah Remini. And the LA Times said that first attorney said that was baseless. So now we've got both attorneys on the record saying that Kendrick Moxon was messing with their client. What about the client himself? Well, I was very fortunate. Armando decided to talk to me. I interviewed him. We talked about how he's a devoted Catholic. He really didn't like the stuff he saw in Scientology's founding, L. Ron Hubbard's relationship with Aleister Crowley. He considers it a Satanist organization, whatever you think of that. But, the flyers he was putting out were about Hubbard and Crowley and that whole, occult origin of Scientology.
Yep.
And he said, when the security guard flagged him down, he just drove over and stopped, and the guy didn't want to talk to him, so he drove on. There was no attempt to hit the guy. But the key question I had for him was, okay, but is it true that you were out there doing this, leafleting and getting in trouble because you'd watched Leah Remini's show? He said, no, absolutely not. If anything, he was reading Andreas Held-Lund's website. Operation Clambake was what got him. Andreas, we miss you. We love you. That he was just very clear on the record with me. It had nothing to do with Leah Remini. In fact, that first attorney of his, when he was learning the case and they were talking about his problems with Scientology, he said it was the attorney who brought up Leah's show, not Armando.
Right.
So I'm just really glad that Armando talked to me, and now we have all three people on the record, Armando Garcia and both of his attorneys, saying that Scientology's version is not correct and that Kendrick Moxon was witness tampering. And so that my question is any of this ever going to result in something? I mean, not only the LA Times has real good reporting showing that suggesting that a DA in the Danny Master's case was run off the road and his house was vandalized, and they believe it was Scientology. And then in this other case, Scientology's witness tampering, trying to get them to falsely say Leah Remini was involved. Where is law enforcement in this? When is Scientology going to pay a price for this kind of thing? And let me just remind you who Kendrick Moxon is. He was an unindicted co-conspirator in the Snow White case back in the 70s.
Yes. This guy goes all the way back. And he knows, definitely, this guy knows where some bodies are buried. I mean, Kendrick Moxon, he's also OT 7 or 8.
Oh, he's OT 8. I got a picture of him with a certificate.
Yeah. So, and this is the guy, now, not to get like too personal, but I am going to say this because it needs to be said, this is a man who lost his own daughter to the church and still pimps for them. I mean, he's just so deep in the cult. I don't think he can see straight. And witness tampering, obviously, this guy has no ethical boundaries or guidelines, that he lives by, except what David Miscavige tells him to do. And so he does it. He's just David's lackey, and he screwed up here. and he's probably going to skate because these guys do, because it takes a lot of time and effort to file complaints with the bar and provide the evidence and put all this stuff together, and who's going to do that. And so the guy just keeps skating. It's very frustrating, right? But this is the arena where Scientology really invests their time and money, and it shows. They're not investing it in getting new people in. It's so obvious. But this is the arena where they really put the thumb screws on, pay the private investigators, pay the thugs to run people off roads, break into people's houses, right? And we know the names of these people. I mean, you've featured them on your blog, the names of the exact corrupt retired cops, fired cops, these types of sleaze guys who the church goes after for this, gets to do their dirty work, So fair game, illegal practices, the GO, OSA operations and the intelligence crap, it's all still going on. This is not ancient history, and here we have proof of it right there. Surprise, they're a cult. That's what they act like. All right. Well, hopefully we'll see some consequences. Let's see what happens. All we can do is expose, and hope that people take up the torch and do something about it. Tony, I want to thank you for taking the time this week to help inform everybody about what's going on. I really appreciate it. Any preview of what we got coming up this week?
Oh gosh, I've got some really good stories I'm trying to get out. I've been trying to land, and I think this week we're going to get some good ones. So just come on by the Substack and check it out.
Yeah, definitely do. The address is right there on the screen in front of you, folks. Definitely sign up, get your daily notifications, and you too can be in the loop on what's going on with Scientology every week. And of course, subscribe to this channel as well, because if I don't say that, then the YouTube gods, look down unfavorably upon me. All right, so I will see you guys next week. Bye-bye.